Welcome back to the Canine Campus Podcast. This is episode 15. Today, we're going to be talking about preventing behavior problems by choosing the right dog for your lifestyle. How you doing, Devin?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. Today, we want to talk about if there's a dog in your future, what are the things you need to consider when considering a dog? You know, things like how important is breed, what the importance of your lifestyle, your family and household structure. There are a slew of things to think about, and just a few moments before we started rolling tape on this, Devin, you cut to the chase on why you wanted to talk about this.
I want to talk about this because I am currently training a slew of Christmas present puppies. Mm-hmm. And my bet would be, and I should actually do a quantitative study of this, my bet would be with 90% accuracy, I can predict the behavioral problems that families are going to be dealing with based upon the dog they chose in combination with their lifestyle.
Right, gotcha. And again, you're talking about Christmas puppies. We love dogs. Chances are just about everybody listening to this show loves dogs. The more you get to know them, the more you realize that it's a lot of work. It's a major modification to your lifestyle if you're doing it right, if you're doing it with any respect for the animal.
It's a compromise. Well, before even choosing a pet, let me say this. If your plan is to teach your child to be responsible for a living creature, and this is going to be a life lesson for them, and they're going to be responsible for the dog, you're already off on the wrong foot.
Right.
Putting a child in charge of a dog is like asking a child to be the primary caregiver for an infant who never gets older than 3 years old. Right. So that's not to say that I think it's absolutely essential that children have a vital role in the raising and training and rearing of a dog. Right. But they must be supervised and they must be aided. So I have family members that come to my classes, and the adults sit back in the chair as 9-year-old Johnny tries to train the dog. It's unfair to Johnny, it's unfair to the dog. And on top of that, as we've discussed in past podcasts, consistency is absolutely essential to successful training. And what that means is that everyone that interacts with that dog on a regular basis, meaning the rest of the family, needs to know the same skills that they're insisting Johnny pick up on his own. So it's really got to be a group effort, and if it can't be a group effort, think about goldfish. Or hermit crabs. Actually, my assistant just got hermit crabs, for her 5-year-old. What an appropriate gift. They eat dog food. Who knew? I mean, hermit crabs eat dog food and, relatively low requirements. So what I want to talk about today is just some things to think about. I'm not here to give you answers necessarily about, what I think you should get in a dog. I want to get some of the important questions out there. I think one of the most disturbing trends I've seen in the last year to 2 years, and I was just out to dinner with a fellow dog trainer who's a big-time agility person, is how popular Australian Shepherds have gotten as pets. Right. And I think that, human beings are largely driven by aesthetics. And we bring home what we think is cute. Right. And we really don't give a lot of consideration to what that creature was designed to do. And yes, Australian Shepherds are adorable. They are also designed to run 100 to 200 miles a day. Right. Playing with your children in the living room or out in the front yard does not come anywhere close to meeting their exercise requirements. Right. They, also, parents don't think it's cute when this dog herds their children by nipping at their heels and ankles, even though that's exactly what the dog's supposed to do. And so it happens when you purchase or you bring into your household a dog that has these kinds of very specific requirements and they don't get them, their frustration comes out in their most prominent skill. So Australian Shepherds tend to be very mouthy when they're frustrated. They tend to be very nippy. Mm-hmm. And it goes from just nipping the ankles to nipping arms or sort of anything that's kind of floating out there in the air because they've got all this excess pent-up energy. Right. And that means that a controlled nipping turns into something more. And I see this also with golden retrievers and labs, mouthy breeds, when they don't get what they need, that mouth is what becomes...
They use their mouth more
to express their frustration.
Sure.
And, our golden retrievers and labs great dogs? Absolutely. They're sporting and working breed dogs, are meant to work with human beings, and that's traditionally why we've brought them in our home. But at the time, when everyone says, oh, I had labs when I grew up or goldens when I grew up. Well, when you grew up, there weren't fences. We let the dogs out in the morning. They roamed all day. They came back at night.
Yeah.
They were beautifully socialized, and they had much more exercise and stimulation.
Right.
A lab that gets to roam in the woods and do what it wants is utterly different than a lab that's in, a small fenced-in yard with no other dogs to play with except, its primary playmates end up being the kids. It's a totally different situation. So, and by the way, I'm not disparaging any breed here. I love all breeds. Once again, my friend Patty, who's a dog trainer, does a lot of agility. She has 2 Aussie Shepherds.
Great dogs.
They are literally the only Australian Shepherds I've met in the last year and a half that actually get the mental and physical stimulation that they need. And that takes a lot of work. For starters, she has 7 dogs total.
Right, yeah.
And they go for miles of walks every day. I mean, she's a really committed dog owner. So
well, and what we're talking about here is really a little bit of virtual pet selection counseling. You studied this at your time in Purdue, and one of the things that might behoove anybody who's trying to figure out the best breed for them after listening to this show is perhaps talking to a local dog trainer or their veterinarian to talk about a little further and more in depth about their lifestyle, about their needs and their desires, and what breeds might best work for them.
I think one of the big mistakes people make too, it's either purely, I think this dog is cute. It's either a purely aesthetic decision. A lot of times it's, as we've discussed, kind of an emotional childhood, kind of got emotional baggage about this particular breed. I think also we think we'll change our lifestyle for our dog. Oh, if I get a dog, I'll walk more.
Yes.
I'll start jogging. I haven't jogged for 5 years, but I'm going to start jogging when I get that dog.
Guilty.
And may I say, if you want a dog that does nothing but lie on the couch, get a rescued greyhound.
Right, yeah.
There are plenty of them. They need homes. They are lovely dogs, and after they run about 100 feet, they're pretty much done for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, they want the couch, and they're pretty much done for the day. They are lovely, lovely dogs. And I would say, as a hound owner, if you're looking for a mellower breed, they got to get their sniff on, and they like new sniffs. And I'm not saying that, and there are different kinds of hounds. There are hounds that are designed to do like real field work, like labs and goldens, and then there's, house hounds.
Right.
We got a couple of house hounds. And okay. So a couple of things here. We're just going to kind of go through this, and we're going to post this worksheet on our website. So anyone that kind of wants to go, like I said, doesn't provide answers, but it gives you good food for thought. First thing is, think about your household members. Who's in your house? How old are they? And how are they capable of managing themselves in the presence of a dog? Are you going to have to manage them in the presence of a dog?
So do you have an infant to worry about? Are the kids all in high school? And might they be really kind of responsible members of the training team?
Like how much assistance can you get reasonably? Are you on your own on this? Consider current household pets as well. Do you have other dogs, cats, fish? Do you have other little creatures in your household to consider?
And worth mentioning there is, as we've heard, 2 dogs are a household, 3 dogs are a pack.
Yes.
And
we found that out the hard way.
Is it Karen Pryor has a book called The Multi-Dog Household?
Multi-Dog Household, Feeling Outnumbered, Living in a Multi-Dog Household. And is it John Katz? He's got a book out too. And he's actually the one that coined that phrase, 2 dogs are in your family, 3 dogs are a pack.
So we'll have links to those as well. Just that's a small thing to consider, but it makes a huge difference.
Monumental difference between 2 dogs and 3 dogs.
Right.
Monumental. Think about previous household pets. What pets have you had? I get a lot of clients who have recently lost a dog after many, many years, and they elect to get a puppy, and it's been 10 years since they've had a puppy, and they they're at a different place in their life than when their previous dog was a puppy. They have forgotten what's required with a puppy, so think about that. Okay, here we go. This is going to, some of your, what's coming up next will kind of play into the training you decide to do with your dog and what kind of dog you get. How often do adults visit your house? Do you have people there on a daily basis, just a couple of times a week, maybe a couple of times a month, or infrequently? Think about the FedEx man, think about that kind of stuff, lawn care, maintenance. How many adults visit? How often do children visit? How old are the children that visit? Once again, are these children that can be self-possessed and responsible in the presence of a dog or not?
Right.
How often do they visit? Once again, daily, numerous times weekly, occasionally monthly, or infrequently. What is your current lifestyle? Is it hectic, moderately busy, controllable, calm, and quiet? Right. If it's very hectic, can you add this kind of responsibility? That's just something to think about. Do you want to add something else to your plate?
Right.
Once again, I have a lot of clients who say, well, I have kids. I thought, I had dreams that the dog would play with the kids and the kids would play with the dog and they'd entertain each other. Well, it takes a long time for a dog to get to that point. There needs to be house training, there needs to be crate training, there needs to be bite inhibition, there needs to be socialization. Even after all of that, you might not end up with a dog that's comfortable with really invasive play techniques.
Right.
Furthermore, I don't care what breed it is. I don't care how well socialized it is. I tell every single client that I have never to leave a child unattended with a dog. So if your plan is to have them occupy themselves while you go do something else, I don't think that's a good plan. Okay, does anyone in your family have special needs? And that's just, important to consider what we need to socialize a dog to and who can be involved in the training. Is anyone in your home allergic to animals?
Right, and grooming, the coat, all that kind of stuff.
And we're actually going to even get to that even further. Are there any major family changes in your near future? Now, I think this is probably one of the most important considerations, and of course the hardest, because can you look into the future, but are you going to have kids? Is there going to be a birth of a child? Are you going to move?
Are you getting divorced?
In fact, I have an 8-year-old German Shepherd in a class right now who is a child of divorce and who has a lovely new home, has been in it for a month, but sadly will jump into every single car that it sees thinking it's going to take it home.
Right.
And this new family, it's going to be wonderful, and we're going to get past the transition period. It's a lovely, lovely dog. And I think it's wonderful that a family that's in the middle of something as painful as divorce recognized that they did not have the wherewithal to give this dog what it needed. So I'm not saying anyone's at fault, but that's something to consider. Schedule changes. Could there be major schedule changes, marital changes? Do you live in a house, in an apartment, on a farm? If you're renting, the size of the dog you have really matters. How much yard you're going to have really matters. So that's a big consideration. How big is your yard? What type of fencing is around your yard? Chain link, invisible fence, privacy, no fence. Do you live in a subdivision where fences aren't allowed? There are some breeds, gaze hounds in particular, Rhodesian Ridgebacks come to mind, but there's a lot of different gaze hounds, that really do poorly on invisible fencing.
Right.
They will blow right through it. Huskies are known to blow right through it. Dogs that have really strong prey drive will blow right through it. Fearful dogs, not good on invisible fences. I mistakenly believed before I got my first dog that I just put in an invisible fence and everything would be fine. Well, it's much more complicated than that. And thankfully, one of the first breeders we spoke to said she would not give us a dog if we had an invisible fence, because she actually cared about her puppies and wanted to make sure they didn't get hurt. And so we had to spend, and actually, we ended up going to the pound in the end anyway, but we had to spend the money.
What we saved on the dog, we spent on the fence.
We put it to our fence, exactly. Where will your pet spend most of its time? Indoors, outdoors, 50-50. What's that access going to be like?
Right.
One of the things that we found was important was that when the dogs were transitioning from outside to inside, having a tile floor, sort of a mud room kind of situation really helped.
And putting up gates to restrict the rest of the house.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Is that something you're comfortable with and you can live with?
And do you have kids that can, how tall is the gate? How tall does it need to be based on the dog? Right. Can your children operate the gate if you have kids? And what about your cats? Can they get through the gate?
And does that work for everybody in your house?
And does that work for everyone in the house? How will your pet be managed in your backyard? Once again, is there going to be a fence? Are you not sure? Are you planning to tie them out? Some states now, it's illegal to tie dogs out. There are 30% more dog bites from dogs that have been tied out. It's a contributor to aggression issues,
Right.
not only territorial, but barrier frustration as well. So I think that, if your solution is I'm going to tie my dog out to a stake or a run between trees, that might be better for a short-term solution as opposed to an actual
Right.
long-term solution. And remember, too, that when you have a dog tied out, they are not protected from what comes in. They can be
Right.
attacked by other dogs. This is true of an invisible fence, too. They can
Sure.
be attacked by other dogs, neighborhood children.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It's a risky proposition.
are you going to fix your dog? I mean, if it's tied out, it could easily encounter, you can have puppies. You don't necessarily want puppies. What will your pet's indoor areas include? Full access to rooms, limited access to rooms, allowed on furniture, allowed on some furniture, not allowed on furniture. This is a critical thing to consider right from puppyhood. If you've got a dog that's going to be 150 pounds and you don't want it on furniture when it's 150 pounds, then it shouldn't be on furniture when it's 12 pounds. Because it doesn't understand that when it gets bigger, it's not allowed on furniture. Set the rules for something like that right from the get-go. Now, in terms of access to rooms, a lot of times that's house training dependent. We start out with our dogs having very limited access, and then as they become more reliable, they earn the privilege to more rooms. Where will your pet sleep? Crate, their own bed, family member's bed, not recommended. I say that, and I know everyone's like, I'd die if I weren't cuddled up to my dog at night. Outside. How long will your pet, and I'm saying that's another option outside. Our dogs sleep inside. One is crated. The others are on their own bed. It's not to say that some dogs aren't fine on family beds. Keep in mind that elevated surfaces, like furniture, highly, highly valuable in the dog world. Right. And when I work on aggression cases, particularly aggression directed at household or family members, the absolute first thing we do, the first protocol is no furniture. Right. They lose that privilege. How long will your pet be left alone during the day? Please think about this. If your pet's going to be left alone during the day for 8 hours or more, is that really fair to your dog? Mm-hmm. And when they're puppies, does that mean you're going to crate them for 8 hours a day? Because that's abusive by a lot of people's standards.
And a lot of people, despite our, we're big fans of the crate as a training tool and a management tool. A lot of people I've spoken to are not comfortable with the crating process. And so if you're not going to be comfortable with that, if you're not going to use a crate, or what other tools can you use to manage?
Right. And that's because, it's so interesting you said that, because someone in my class just this weekend said, well, I just don't know how I feel about a crate. And I get it. I mean, unless you, our dogs see a crate and they can't wait to dive in it. We were careful about how we trained it. We didn't abuse our use of it. I mean, so it's a great thing for our dogs. But, she said, well, I've just been using baby gates and that seems to be working. And then her next question was, how do I prevent my dog from chewing the molding and the chair legs? And, it was just, I had to laugh. I said, well, and she was clear. Yeah. She was ambivalent about the crate. And I don't try to talk anyone into using a tool they're not comfortable with, because then they don't really use it well. Mm-hmm. But one of the other things about a crate is it teaches self-entertainment.
Absolutely.
Which I think is really important.
And it's a safe environment.
Yeah, it is a safe environment. So, but, I think how long a dog is left alone during the day is a really, really important thing to think about. Right. Are there other pets in the house? What about house training in the critical stages? That kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not going to sit back and say my dogs aren't left alone at some points for 8 hours a day. But, when they were puppies, we basically rearranged our entire lives to make sure that they were never alone for more than 3-4 hours.
Exactly.
Tops. And actually, the first month the puppy's in the house, it's even less than that. So, where will your pet be kept when you are not home? Crate, outside, free access to house, specific room. How much time do you plan on interacting with your dog daily? And this includes training, planning, grooming, exercise. Less than an hour, 1 to 2 hours, more than 3 hours. Interesting, we had a letter from a listener who had a black lab puppy, I believe, and the puppy was alone all day in the kennel. I think it had maybe half an hour to an hour of interaction with the family and the kids in the morning, and an hour or so, maybe hour and a half of interaction with the family when they got home from school, and they were already having problems with jumping up, and it simply isn't enough exercise. I mean, that is not enough exercise for a lab by any stretch of the imagination. And if anyone's interested in creative ways to exercise your dog, listen to our food toy show, because once again, it's not just about physical exercise, it's about mental exercise as well. And the two in combination give you a dog that is, as we say in dog training, a tired dog makes for a happy owner.
Right.
So prioritize 3 activities you would like to do with your pet: jogging, swimming, agility training, whatever.
Yeah.
How often will you work your pet off your property for mental stimulation? This is really essential. Jean Donaldson, in her seminal book, Culture Clash, which we've referenced on this podcast numerous times, says that if you can't give your dog 10 new smells a day, you shouldn't have a dog. At that point, I think I was ready to give up our dog for adoption, because 10 new smells a day. But actually, it's not that hard. If you walk 100 yards down your road, there are 10 new smells, right? Because someone's been coming by.
It's an easy thing to do, but you need to commit to doing it.
This doesn't mean an hour-long walk. This means a 10 to 20-minute walk a couple of times a day off property. It's really critical that your dog gets outside of their territory. This reduces territorial issues. This is another way to maintain a robust socialization agenda. It's an important thing. Who will be in charge of feeding your pet? Once again, is this going to be a family thing? Is it going to be mom and dad, or is little Johnny supposed to do it? I personally think it should be a family thing, but who will be in charge of cleaning up after the pet?
Good question.
Well, may I say, there's nothing that gets people on board with house training than having to deal with the consequences of not house training. So one of the things that's in our house training suggestion is that, Johnny, who let's say is 9, is responsible for the puppy's house training for 15 minutes. So let's say the dog's gone to the bathroom. Okay, Johnny, you watch the dog for 15 minutes. And if there's any incident in that 15 minutes, then Johnny is the primary cleaner-upper, obviously with help and supervision. So this is a great way to keep everyone, kind of get everyone on board, especially if you rotate it around the family. How often do you plan to train your pet? Multiple times a day, multiple times a week, occasionally as little as possible. Mm-hmm. Once again, if you're thinking as little as possible, consider a greyhound, consider a pug. The cats of the dog world, as we call little puggy poo-poos. It's not that they're not trained. They would love to be trained, but if you don't train them, they tend to be fairly self-entertained. And keep in mind, when I'm saying things about breed, it's gross generalization. Every dog's an individual. If acquiring a puppy or kitten, will you take it to socialization classes? Do you plan on crate training your pet? Who will be responsible for administering your pet's medical care? And that's a really important question, because a critical part of puppy training is handling and grooming exercises, which I, once again, think the whole family should be in on. And this has to be done every day. And so what happens is, when puppies are really little, they don't care what you do to them. You can cut their nails, you can give them a shot. They don't care. Because when they're so young and they're so still at this point underdeveloped, you get to say pretty much what goes, and they'll follow along. But when they reach 4, 5, 6 months and they can start having an opinion, and they're kind of strong enough and well-developed enough to say, no, I put up with this and now I'm not, that's when your early commitment to handling and grooming exercise really can pay off hugely. Let's see, would you prefer to have your pet trained without assistance, with the help of a private trainer, group training classes, leave pet at a training facility, unsure, need more information?
And of course, it's our belief that it's not the dog that needs the training, it's the people.
I want to say that I've been asked to board and train a number of times a dog, and various dogs, and I have, for the most part, refused. I've done it twice under great duress. And I made it clear to the people that I finally agreed to do it for that I did not think it would be successful, and here was why.
Right.
The bottom line is that what dog training is creating a communication system between you and your dog. And if you're not the creator of that system, if you inherit someone else's, it's like having a foreign exchange student come to your house and communicating with them after maybe an hour tutorial in their native language.
Right.
You're really behind the 8 ball. And
Well,
I would
and
say
you've missed out on the process.
Thank you. If you have no interest in training your dog and having that kind of experience with your dog, do you really want a dog? I would say get a cat.
Yeah.
You know, be a servant to a cat. We love it. They're great. What will you do with your pet on the occasions when you travel? Take your pet on a trip, board the pet, hire a pet sitter, other. This is really important. There have been studies, I think I've referenced these in earlier podcasts, of animals that have survived traumatic accidents but died from the combined stress of boarding.
Right.
I believe that boarding and kenneling is a really good skill for a dog to learn. Mm-hmm. Even if you have a pet sitter and it's a great pet sitter, and 90% of the time it's going to be the pet sitter, there are going to be times in your dog's life where the pet sitter isn't available or there's a medical emergency, because in the vet's office, they are essentially kenneled.
Right.
So I think it's a really important skill. And as you know, by the time our dogs are 6 months old, they have had a kenneling experience. Now, when we first do it, we break them in, we drop them off, often together. So,
right.
I mean, the older dogs can help the younger ones, but first for 2 hours, and then we pick them up. Then for maybe 4 hours,
sure.
A few days later, and we pick them up. Then for 6 hours, and we pick them up, and then we leave them overnight usually.
Right.
And we warm them up to it so they know we're coming back. And I also am very careful to look for signs. Was this stressful for you? Are you scared of things that you weren't scared of before? Obviously tour the facility. We have a wonderful facility in town that's owned by the most amazing woman imaginable. Actually, she recently sold it, which makes me a little sad and a little worried.
Right, but we were very mindful of kind of seeing how our dogs reacted to the change in personnel. Seemed fine.
Right.
But it's something to be mindful of. And another thing with boarding is the cost that's involved.
Yeah.
And how much do you travel during the year?
Yeah.
Consider, the hotel cost for the dog is going to add up.
So important to say that because, of course, we just went away for 2 weeks.
And it added up. Yeah.
Financial considerations. Here you go. How much are you budgeting monthly for your pet's food? This is actually something really important to consider because I have seen a huge increase in the last 2 or 3 years in food allergies.
Right.
In purebreds specifically. That's not to say I haven't seen it in some mixed breeds, but I've seen it much, much more predominantly in purebreds. That changes everything.
Yeah.
There's not only, these specialty foods, and we recently this summer changed to a raw diet, so not for allergy reasons, for other reasons. So, if you think you're just going to go pick up a bag at the grocery store, I hope it works out that way for you, but sometimes life throws you a curveball and you get allergies. How much are you willing to pay for your pet? Just from the get-go. It's interesting. A lot of studies have shown that the more people pay for a pet, the more they're willing to put up with behavioral problems because they feel that
it's worth it.
They've invested in the pet. And so animals that come from the shelter are returned for behavior problems that would surprise a lot of people versus purebreds that bite their owners and have sort of atrocious behavior issues that are kept in the home. Do you plan on spaying or neutering your pet? An important consideration.
Please do.
Please do, although, as you know, I'm a huge proponent of spay, neuter, and controlling the pet population. But one of the trends that we've seen happen is that really responsible people with really nice dogs spay and neuter them. Less responsible people with kind of nasty dogs don't. And we end up having shelter populations that have really been degraded by that. So actually
or also dogs are bred for physical appearance but not for great behavior. And so we've got these beautiful dogs that are just nuts.
It's just a great tragedy. It's for everyone. I wish I had $1 for everyone that told me their dog was, an AKC champion. And, once again, it looks really pretty, but that doesn't mean that it's a nice dog.
Right.
And it was actually my vet, who I love and who's big into spay neutering, who said, now I actually tell clients who have a really super nice, well-tempered dog, maybe you should breed them once.
Right.
Which I think is kind of interesting. But that's a whole nother kit and caboodle. And let me tell you, breeding is a serious responsibility, and you will lose money. If you do it right, you lose money. How much budgeting are you going to spend annually on your pet's medical care? Once again, if you have a healthy dog or cat, that's one thing. Life throws you curveballs.
Sure.
And
this is another good reason to talk to a veterinarian before you adopt a dog.
Yeah.
find out not only, here are the answers to my survey, can you talk to me about breeds,
Right.
but also how much is this going to cost me if nothing goes wrong?
Right.
What are some of the kind of the medium and really bad
And I
case
think
scenarios you've
right. I think
experienced
you
over the
need to
past
sort
year?
of ask questions like, if there's hip dysplasia. There's plenty of tests for hip dysplasia,
Right.
but there are definitely breeds that are more prone to it than others. What's my game plan? I mean, and one of the
Right.
most important things with a dog that has early hip dysplasia is exercise. Dog's got to be walked, other muscles have to be kept strong. Each breed comes with its own baggage, and one of the wonderful things about mixed breeds is that you can luck out and skip
Sure.
all of that. You can also get hit between the eyes with surprises, which we have.
Right.
I mean, we lost 2 mixed breeds very early, but that's the way it goes.
Sure.
Which of the following pet sources are you considering? A reputable breeder, animal shelter, humane society, breed rescue organization, pet store, other.
Right.
Let's see. Pet characteristics. What other animals will your pet interact with? Dog, cats, birds, squirrels, groundhogs, rabbits, deer. All that matters. Primary purpose for obtaining your pet: adults pet, family pet, child pet, breeding, show, hunting, protection, farm, outside pet. Breeds you're considering. Has someone in your household owned a puppy less than 6 months of age? If so, how long ago? What age would you like your pet to be when you acquire it? Do you want a young one? Do you want a puppy? My recommendation is not before 8 weeks. I don't care what a breeder tells you. There's a lot of behavior issues with dogs that are removed from their pack prior to 8 weeks. And there's some really interesting studies in England about keeping litters together until the puppies are 12 weeks old and actually letting the mother wean the puppies herself. Their bite inhibition is phenomenal. Their patience and self-control is phenomenal. Yeah. There's some real behavioral benefits to that. Are you interested in training your pet? Yes, I look forward to it. No, I would like a pet that requires little training. Once again, think about goldfish, think about cats. House training problems. Now the next group of questions all have the same answers. You could live with the problem, you would do whatever it takes to correct the problem, or the problem would prompt you to part with the pet. So, house training problems. Is that something you can live with, work with, would get rid of the dog? Shyness with people. Now, this, of course, ties into how often are people at your house, how often are kids at your house. Shyness with people. Aloofness with the family. What if your dog isn't a cuddler? I just had a client whose dog had real fear of men, bonded with the mom and the kids. And actually, this is one of the rare dogs in the universe that was kid-proof. You could climb over it, pull its ears, stick your fingers in its eye. This dog wouldn't budge. It was fabulous. But it shied away from the husband. He actually would not come to class or work with the dog. He expected his wife to fix the problem, even though it did not pertain to her. And now they're rehoming the dog, which is very sad. Excitability. Think about this if you're thinking about a sporting breed.
Right.
Excitability. Once again, if your dog, if you've chosen a sporting or working breed and they do not get the exercise they need, it can come out in excitability, and I'm talking about jumping up, the zanies, mouthing. Think about that. Demands attention. Now, dogs demand attention in a lot of ways. They bark,
Right.
they paw, they do destructive behavior. So if your dog is an attention demander, and by the way, these are things, many of the things I'm bringing up now can actually be prevented in large part by early training.
Sure.
Not all, because, it's nature and nurture. So you can do all the training in the world. And a perfect example is Surprise, who, as people that have listened to this before know, someone left this little puppy at our door. And they've heard my show on socialization and how aggressively we socialized him. And when he turned 13 and 14 months old, he started to develop real fears. Started with men and branched out from that. And it's something that we've been working on, but that's a perfect example of you think you've gotten over that hump and you haven't gotten over that hump. And,
Right.
He's a dog trainer's dog, so he's out with me a lot.
Sure.
He's, he's exposed to a lot of things, but I have to be careful about how I do it. Okay. Jumping on people. How do you feel about that?
How do your
want
friends
it?
and family feel about it?
And, let's keep in mind, if it's a 10-pound dog, that's different than an 80-pound dog jumping up on you. And, once again, if you have a dog that has high exercise requirements and they don't get met,
you're going to get
they're going to jump up on people.
behavior. Yep.
And if they're not jumping up on people, they're going to do something else. Digging in the yard and destructive behavior. And once again, these last ones that we're talking about are really the result of a dog not getting what it needs.
Right. And
there
are questions about how can you as a person, how are you going to deal with this? And I think what's really important about it is to answer these questions and to do it really honestly.
Yeah.
And the idea here is to take a really
this
solid
is the next
look
like
at
10
the
to
way you live
15
your
years
life
of
and
your
what you
life
want.
and the life of your family. Chewing and destruction. Once again, huskies, for example, are known for their destruction when they do not get what they need. And let's be honest, our husky is not pulling a sled every day.
Right.
They're known for siding. They're big siding chewers. They take apart the whole outside of the house. And, we were alerted to that very early on in puppyhood because we have a great vet. And we implemented right from the get-go a lot of mental and physical stimulation exercises for our dogs. So, luckily we haven't seen the destructive behavior. We have seen some of the demand behavior. We haven't seen destructive behavior. Excessive vocalization. There's a lot of different kinds of barking. One of the most common is boredom barking. So
Right.
there's fear barking, there's boredom barking, there's protection barking. So most people say, well, I don't mind if my dog barks if it's someone at the door. I want them to protect me or alert me, but I don't want them barking any other time. Well, there are some dogs, yes, that are bred for protection work, more prone for protection work, but vocalization, when it's part of their repertoire, it becomes part of their repertoire. How often do you plan to groom your pet? Like, does your pet have grooming needs? Are you going to do it yourself? Are you going to take them out to have it done? Nail trimming. We have one dog that doesn't need it at all. We have two that need it on a fairly regular basis. This is something that, you have to make a decision. And what I find is a lot of people get someone else to trim their dog's nails because their dog doesn't like it, and they're afraid they're going to quick their dog's nail. And the bottom line is if you do it all the time when they're puppies and you just shave off the end and you make it fun and you pair it with treats. And, we had a dog that absolutely hated it, and it took about a month and a half of really solid training to actually shave my first nail. But now I pick up the clippers and he starts dancing and we can't wait to have his nails trimmed. So, but it takes time and it takes committed effort. And Surprise used to not care, and now he's a little worried about it, so I'm taking my time and working with him. How important is it to you that your pet, quote, guards your home? Think about this. I have clients that purposely get big, scary dogs because they want their home protected, but they have children, and their children have friends, and they expect the dog to differentiate between the people that come over that are friends and the people that aren't. And I think that requires a level of training that the average person does not achieve.
Right.
There's actually a sport, Schützen, which is this, which is protection training. And that sport has a very rigorous temperament test before a dog can even partake in it.
Right.
Pretty much, they've got to be bomb-proof.
Yeah.
And they've got to be able to turn it on and off immediately. And I always cringe when people tell me they're getting a dog for protection reasons because, it's often the average dog owner, and they're not going to train that dog to the level that's required. So you end up creating a nightmare that's dangerous. So your friends can't come over. Your kids' friends are scared of your dog. It's not good. What size pet do you prefer? It's interesting. They did a study of aggression, and anyone that listened to our show, I think it was the Brainiac version or whichever one we did from the APDT conference, heard about the aggression study that Dr. Wayne Knudsen, I think who it was. I think I just said his last name wrong. That's okay. He did it. Oh, I think it's like Hunthausen, I think. He did a study, and what it showed was when you look at the aggression incidence from breed to breed, Rottweilers actually fell relatively low on the list. Basset Hounds much higher. You had surprising results, but then you have to ask the question, how much damage can a dog do?
Right.
Well, that took Rottweilers from almost the bottom of the list and moved them almost up to the top. So it wasn't that they were biting more than any other dog. It's that when they bite, there's real damage. And I can say that in my own business, I have clients with small dogs. I call them the yippity yappities, that will put up with bites all the time.
Right.
Because they're little bites, and they might break skin, and they hurt, because I've been bitten by them too. But they'll put up with that versus someone with a 40, 50, or 60-pound dog or above, where biting is a totally different situation.
Right.
So, and once again, if you're not going to train your dog, and your dog has some energy needs, and they're not going to get them as much, and jumping up is an issue for you, well, once again, think about getting a little dog.
Right.
Because people are less worried about a little dog jumping up than a big dog. In fact, I have many clients with small dogs that don't teach them not to jump up. In fact, they like it that they jump up because they can treat them easier. They don't have to lean over. And they don't even care if they pull on leash. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
so
sure.
How important is it to you that your pet wants to sit in your lap and follow you around, etc.? You know, there are...
How needy of a dog do you want?
Right. There are definitely breeds that are more independent than others, a husky being one that's considered very independent. Also, it is the needy dogs, the really needy dogs, where we see separation anxiety issues. And may I say that the statistics on working with separation anxiety, pretty dismal, hovering around 20% of success. With drugs, I think it's higher than that, but I don't know how much. But you know, they're destroying your house. You can't crate them because it makes it worse. Confinement makes separation anxiety worse. You want them to be safe and not hurt themselves. I mean, I've had clients whose dogs have thrown themselves out of a second floor window, broken glass, you know, landed on the car. I mean, horrible, horrible things. Well, you can't rearrange your life, right? You can't stop working. So, you know, I like dogs that are affectionate, but I like self-entertained dogs. And I teach my dogs from a very early age to be self-entertained. Once again, it's nature and nurture. You can teach it. But if your dog's got a proclivity. And then last but not least, how much does hair on your clothing or furniture bother you? And may I add to that, how much do muddy paw prints in your kitchen bother you? Or
nose prints on your car window.
I know this is kind of a lengthy one, and we talked about a lot of things. And once again,
good things, though.
Think about these things. This is a long commitment, and the animal shelters are completely flooded by people who didn't consider these things.
Right.
And then found themselves in an unlivable situation. And, you know, we definitely want to reduce the numbers in the shelters.
Sure. Well, while we were talking, you know, I came across a quote online that said, adopting companion animals is the closest thing you can have to choosing your relatives, which I think is wonderful because, you know, we love our family of animals at home, there's no doubt.
Can't
Think about
choose
relatives,
your family.
you know.
Can't choose them.
Relatives are pretty, you know, they can be great or they can be, they can be something else too. So it really bears consideration. What we've been talking...
It is not a frivolous decision.
It is not a frivolous decision. So also we were talking about feeling outnumbered, how to manage and enjoy a multi-dog household. That book is actually by Karen London and Patricia McConnell. We'll have a link to that on DogWise on our website. What we've been talking about today has been based on the Pet Selection Counseling Worksheet from Purdue University's Animal Behavior Clinic that you attended, Devin.
Yes.
We're going to have a link to that on our website. That'll also probably automatically download with your podcast. But again, the idea with this, you know, we've talked about kind of what these questions mean and why you should be asking them and what you should think about when you're answering them. The really important thing, I think, is that you take a look at this, you answer it thoughtfully and honestly, and then after, what's the next step, Devin? After you've downloaded this worksheet, you've filled it out, you've really given it a lot of thought.
I think that, you know, I'm always really delighted when someone writes me and says, I'm thinking about getting a dog.
Right.
I mean, here they haven't gotten the dog yet and they're already contacting a trainer. Can I come to your classes? Can I see what you're about?
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake people make are the impulse buys or the buys that are, and let's, full disclosure, our first dog, Stace.
My fault.
Impulse buy.
Yep.
He saw something pretty and fluffy, and the next thing I know, it's in the back of the car.
Right.
And, you know, how did we...
And this was even after doing the research.
And we had done research. We had been talking about getting a dog. We've been thinking about getting a dog. The Husky was not the breed we were even considering at all. She wasn't even on the short list. And in fact, she didn't make the short list because they're absolutely discouraged for first-time dog owners because they're so challenging and independent. And here she is in the back of our car. And so the long and the short of it is I became a dog trainer because if I didn't, I would have lost my mind living with this dog. And I am not kidding when I say that. And I'm really not.
It was a tough go.
It was survival. It was, almost within a week, we realized we'd made probably a pretty big mistake, that this dog in no way worked with our lifestyle and was not getting, she let us know from the absolute minute she came through the door, and this was like at 10 weeks old, that she was not getting what she needed from us.
Right.
And so this, hence my journey to dog training began, and luckily we had an amazing vet who really got us on the right track right from the get-go with Culture Clash, and which really helped us understand, as frustrated as we were, it really helped us understand how frustrated she was.
Sure, yeah.
And that really, and she's been with us for 9 years. She's a certified therapy dog. So it's, there's a very happy ending to the story. And there are times I, give her a huge hug and a kiss and say, if not for you, I wouldn't be doing what I was doing. So it was obviously meant to be. But how many people have the opportunity or the ability to change careers to accommodate this decision?
And our point being with this, and I think Purdue University's point with asking these questions is, you don't have to if you make a smart decision. So I think the most important thing, it seems, is answer these questions and then sit down with the veterinarian, sit down with the dog trainer you trust.
You trust, or someone the veterinarian recommends. Really talk about the breeds they've seen that are nice. Our vets, for example, work with so many different dogs. They know of local breeders who do a great job. They know of local breeders possibly to avoid. They definitely know breeds to avoid, the common pitfalls of and admittedly, our Husky came from Husky Rescue, and she's probably not a purebred, but she's enough of a Husky to have a lot of Husky tendencies.
Sure.
Our other dogs, they're hound mixes. They're Virginia Specials. So, we didn't know what we were kind of getting with them temperamentally. Although, I personally, I know I'm a little biased, feel a hound should be mixed in with a little bit of everything because they're so fun.
They're always a good choice.
Not always. They do have that wandering nose. It helps to have a fenced-in yard. Helps to have a fenced-in yard.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Devin.
Thanks.
This is the Canine Campus Podcast. It's the pet selection counseling episode.
It was a long one.
It was a long one, but worth it. Download the worksheet from our website. We'll have links to the worksheet, books on making the choices, and probably some great web links as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon on the Canine Campus Podcast. Thanks, Devin.
Thanks.
See you later.